Welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. The Go Bowling at the Glen saw plenty of cars displaying aggressive driving tactics and a dramatic last lap pass. The NTT INDYCAR Series Championship is over. It was pretty much pulled over on lap 12. Safety belt ruining the day of Will Power. Formula 1 chaos at Baku. The replica Supercars Series Sandown 500 endurance race. Just as eventful, Joe San Diego, and with me we have Jackson Lambros from Outlet Media and Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. A big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show: Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for investing in us each and every month. You can invest in us. You can also do investment one time through Buy Me Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air. And of course, if you make that investment while we're not on the air, you're just watching us after the races, we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. And we'll start off with NASCAR as this chat room. Encourage everyone to participate. So bummed for SVG. Jackson, what a race.
Let's get into it, man. Absolutely wild scene at Watkins Glen today. Plenty of passing and aggressive racing. One overtime session, which we won't let Ben Schneider get into it tonight, but I'm sure he'll have opinions on that. But regardless of that, it was a finish we're going to be talking about for a while. SVG with a driver error, as he put it himself, hit the wall entering the bus stop, and that allowed Chris Buescher to prosper, get on the back bumper, push him up, and get around. It's his first he's the first non-playoff driver to win in this year's playoffs. It's his first of the year and his first on the road courses. Joe, how big is this win for Buescher and RFK on a day when co-owner Keselowski found himself in his own trouble?
This is huge for Chris Buescher. This is a big statement, and we're coming to Bristol, a racetrack where he knows how to win. I would not count out Chris Buescher as a potential 2-in-a-row winner next weekend at Bristol. He could easily go in there, have a strong race. The beautiful part of this playoff system, with him out of it, he got this win. He could just go out there, focus on wins. He's not worried about point racing. He's not worried about anything. And I think really, especially after what we saw with Ross Chastain last year at Phoenix, where he went out there, went on Phoenix, said, I want to get this race win. I felt Watkins Glen, we saw a lot of drivers that just said, I know there's a playoff going on, but I want to get this win. And we saw Carson Hocevar up towards the front, Michael McDowell, Shane van Gisbergen, all these drivers down, not in the playoffs. They weren't just, oh, here comes a playoff driver. Let's race them a little cleaner. I don't want it. No, they were just all day long, all race long, beating and banging, throwing the car sideways. This was just a fun race. I know it's just one of those deals for Chris Buescher. He's really shown he's a good road course racer because he just beat one of the best, Shane van Gisbergen, in this. What a finish. I mean, he has to be so thrilled with what he just did. Yeah, he said it still stings that he missed the playoffs, but this helps because anytime you win, not only is that going to help you this year, it's going to help when it comes to contract talks, sponsorships. This is a huge moment for RFK.
No, 100%. And I think the big bread and butter of this was not a manufactured win. There was no bumper involved. We didn't see anyone in the wall. It was very much a drive to victory for Chris Buescher, which I think is going to look great for the resume. And I think you made a fantastic point about how Buescher can just kind of send it. He's not in the championship picture. He can just go for wins with no consequence. The issue with that is we've got a lot of drivers in the championship right now that are kind of driving like Chris Buescher, shall we say. Keselowski and a lot of different drivers still in the 16 for the championship got in trouble during the race due to aggression. A lot of 3, even 4 wide into the S's. Tons of beating and banging. MTJ was having none of it, man. He said, I don't know if these guys can call themselves the best in the world when they just drive through everybody. Joe, it looked like we had some people going bowling at the Glen. Did this cross a line for NASCAR? Do we think this is a bad look, or do we think this is a part of road course racing, especially in the playoffs?
We put, for the first time, a natural road course, Watkins Glen, in the playoffs. And I feel when you compare Watkins Glen to Sonoma or Circuits of America, much different character. Whereas Sonoma really passes a lot more tricky. You have to really just focus on the fuel strategy, the race strategy backwards. Circuits of America, it has gotten a little bit on the crazy side. We know the big rush up to turn one where you see a lot of chaos. This track, it has not changed the layout really since they started coming here, except what they did with the curbs this year and the rumble strips outside of the racing limits. But we still saw all the drivers racing just as hard, going wide. We saw the beating and bang, which traditionally we do here. We've seen some good finishes here where there's people beating and banging. This can be a physical and fast road course compared to Sonoma, where you have much more slower pace, got to finesse the car. How many times we saw a car just thrown sideways? I mean, Shane van Gisbergen throwing that car sideways, entering the final corner, just doing everything he can to get around Chris Buescher. I really thought he was going to get there. It's just one of those deals that I really feel this was overall a good NASCAR race, because NASCAR, they promote themselves as their series where there's beating and banging fenders, drivers getting upset at each other, hard racing. Did it cross the line? I would say if it did cross the line or feel like it was starting to get towards that line, that was when we had the restarts and the crashes that occurred, especially the Keselowski William Byron crash. I still can't believe 4 wide entering the S's. All the years of watching NASCAR Watkins Glen from the Winston Cup era up to now, it's picking up intensity every year. The playoffs, you add that in there, it just seemed like that got everybody up a little bit more. And the fact that nobody gave any room for the playoff drivers, I just think this is just one of those classic races where people are going to be talking about for quite some time. Well, does it belong in the playoffs going forward? I know it's not going to be next year, so maybe it'll dial it down, but the fans of Watkins Glen, they're going to probably be saying, hey, we want the playoffs back here again.
I think what makes it a race where you've got guys now going 4 wide in the S's is there's that feeling of competitiveness now, especially on the ovals. I think people wouldn't be putting it 4 wide if they didn't think they had a winning car, right? Or you could argue the contrary of people throwing Hail Marys to try and get position to work. But I just think that shows how competitive the field is. And one of the big victims of just how competitive the field was today, Shane van Gisbergen almost had the win, was obviously very upset today, and defending against Buescher. Does this kind of show, Joe, how tense the Cup Series is in an event like this?
Yeah. Shane van Gisbergen, of course, for our regulars, they know we've been following him with the grid ranking. He's won the grid ranking world championship. He's scored points in World Rally Championship. He seems to do everything, has success, and of course, that win at the Chicago Street Course. This year, okay, he got wins on the road courses in the Xfinity Series. He's trying to get an oval win. He has done several Cup Series races, at times led, but he just still does not have exactly the results. Granted, he's coming here as a learning experience, so we're not expecting him to go out to get a win. What happened in Chicago, the bad luck there, just being in the wrong place when Chase Briscoe locked up and pushed him in the wall, just the way it goes in racing. He ran a smart race. Him and his teammate Ross Chastain, colleague, Trackhouse Alliance, they had everything pretty much going their way. He made a great move on that restart, and it's just a mistake as a driver error that cost him the win. This is showing this is not just a cakewalk for him, these road courses. People say that about the Chicago Street Course, and I'll give him the benefit. Nobody had done a Chicago Street Course or any street course in the Cup Series besides Shane van Gisbergen and Supercars Series. Now he came here to Watkins Glen, a track that has been part of the Cup Series schedule since, I believe, the 80s, throughout the 90s, always been part of the season. Drivers have the notes. Drivers have the experience. The teams have the notes. He really showed he could go out there and get a win. And I felt if he was to get this win, this would have been, for him, a bigger accomplishment than Chicago. Because in Chicago, that was new territory for everyone. To come here to say, hey, I just beat you at a track where Kyle Larson has won, William Byron has won, Truex, Hamlin, Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, the names go on. That would have been huge for him to show, I'm here, I'm the real deal. I just got to work on the ovals. To see how upset he was, you know he wanted it badly. And I think he is just showing that while some people will say, well, Cup Series drivers like Truex said, they're not looking like the best drivers in the world when they keep crashing. But let's be honest, how many times we could have seen more crashes 3 or 4 wide, and they didn't. They're pushing each other to the limits. They're pushing their competition to the limits. Getting that win is so rewarding, and Shane van Gisbergen was just so gutted. A mistake he made by Chris Buescher. I mean, let's think about that. 2021, 22, I don't think we would ever say Chris Buescher would make Shane van Gisbergen make a mistake and lose the race. What an amazing effort by SVG. And this race, he really put it all out there. This is part of racing. You make that mistake on the last lap and it costs you, he's going to learn from it.
I think it just goes to show how much this series and this sport has evolved over the past couple of years. And you, Kobe, and I have talked about how I don't want to say catered that initial win was for Shane van Gisbergen, but the odds and the environment were so in his favor last year at Chicago, and he's proven himself in numerous environments outside of that. Top 10s at ovals, back-to-back road course wins. You watched one of them, Joe, at Portland and Sonoma. It's clear this guy is good, but he's unfortunately today our biggest loser. But let's talk about the playoff picture, because we've got a really big shakeup and a really big winner, and that's Joe Gibbs Racing. Ty Gibbs up into 12th, 6 points above the cut line and below Lord Dennis Hamlin and Martin Truex the second. Brad Keselowski, Harrison Burton, other two below, but JGR is looking at worst. At worst 3 drivers out after the round of 16 in case Brad gets another win before the cut. Joe, how does JGR rebound? Who do you think will keep a good spot in the playoffs once we get to 12 left?
It almost feels like Joe Gibbs Racing has been trying a little bit, let's be different in the playoffs rather than our normal approach, and I feel it has bitten them badly. Atlanta, Denny Hamlin, I'm just going to ride around the back, take it easy, avoid the trouble. Well, he got into trouble. He didn't score that many points. Martin Truex Jr., bad spot in the wrong time when Ryan Blaney and Chris Buescher got together, and he got the worst end of it. Again, Martin Truex Jr., he is not putting himself towards the front. When he got most of his wins, it's because he dominated the races. He was out of the trouble. It just seems like he can't stay in that top 5, that top 10 without going mid-pack and getting himself in trouble. Denny Hamlin, that penalty has really shown how bad it's going to hurt him, because here you are below the cut line. If he didn't get that penalty, kept all those points, he'd be in a much better spot. And Ty Gibbs, a lot of folks thought he was going to be really, I think, advancing through. If he has a bad race, like get caught up in trouble early in Bristol, and next thing you know, below the cut line, 2 drivers get ahead of him, he's in trouble. That would be a huge shock, because I know I predicted Truex Jr. would be out in the first round. And the way he's looking right now, I just don't have confidence in him in Bristol. I think he's going to get caught up in trouble. I think he's going to have an average, sub-average qualifying. Denny Hamlin, he could win there. He's done it before. He probably really hopes Goodyear brings that soft tire again, and we see the tire degradation mess. But Ty Gibbs, if he misses out on this first round, I think that'll be a big surprise to so many people, because he almost won Atlanta, just wrong move, fell back. It just shows the importance of getting the win, getting those playoff points, because at the end, he didn't have that many. He was in single digits, as well as Martin Truex. And for Joe Gibbs, who potentially lose 2, half, or even 3 of his cars, that'd be disastrous. And then you only got Christopher Bell. And for Toyota's sake, Tyler Reddick, the regular season champion, they really had to just say, let's go to Bristol, focus on what we've done good at in Bristol, how we race here, how we get the wins, not try any of these alternative, let's run towards the back. That's not going to work in Bristol. Let's not beat ourselves. Just go out there, do what we do the best.
100%. Let's go for one more question here, and we'll switch roles here. But going into Bristol, top 7 drivers are at least 30 points above the cut line. Are they going into this final race in the round of 16 with a sense of comfort, or do you think there's a little bit of chaos in play here?
They should go in there, just focus on what we need to do to be fast at Bristol. That's the big thing. You don't have to worry about, well, we got to be ahead of this driver, we got to be ahead of that driver in Bristol. You could just go out there, focus on your race. you could think of the different strategies, especially we know at Bristol's there's going to be multiple cautions. I'll be shocked if that first stage or the second stage go caution free. That's not Bristol's character. You could really just go there, focus on your own race. You're not a driver where if you're below the cut line, you're in a must win situation. If you're not fast enough at Bristol, you're then going to be thinking about, okay, we got to beat this car. Hope that car have bad luck. It just becomes much more uncertain. That's really, I think, the concern I have for a driver like Martin Truex Jr., like Denny Hamlin. They need to go there, focus on their own race, not worry about where the other competitors are, where Ty Gibbs is, where Brad Keselowski is. Just go out there, run your own race. So these top 7 drivers, I think they're in a really good spot. The thing you got to avoid at Bristol is getting caught up in a crash early. They tend to have crashes quite a bit in Bristol in that first stage, second stage, and the third stage. Good luck. If you're going to be riding around Bristol, you just got to make sure you and your spotter are on the same page, where if the spotter sees potential chaos coming ahead, maybe just back it down because you got over 30 points. Stage will be different if you're coming to the end of the stage and you got those stage points on the line. You sometimes have to just go for it, because if you go in there 30 points, if you could get those 10 points for the stage win, at 40 points, it's going to be really hard to fall below the cut line. So you got to be feeling good, but it could still, it's Bristol. It could all go up in smoke so quickly.
It's Bristol, baby. Bass Pro Shops night race next weekend, next Saturday night. Denny Hamlin going to try to go back-to-back for victory for that fall race. That is it for us for Cup Series this weekend. And Joe, for the last time in Season 8 of Grid Ranking, bring Kobe back in. Let's talk IndyCar.
NTT INDYCAR Series, and what a dramatic race that left the crowd cheering and 2 donuts on the front straightaway. Alex Palou is now a 3-time NTT INDYCAR Series champion and the second youngest driver to achieve that, behind Sam Hornish Jr. We got the press conference uploaded on our channel. Check it out after the show. Kobe, I got to say, everyone keeps talking about Alex Palou and leading up to this weekend. Oh, the ovals are his weakness. Oh, can he do well in the ovals? Well, I feel like he's just shown he could do good everywhere. And now, since you're here, Jackson, you're here. I know you've been busy all year, multiple events. Does this start to feel like what people in professional sports call a dynasty, where you get a team, championship, Palou, 3 and 4 years? Is this the start of the Alex Palou dynasty in IndyCar?
Wow, Joe, like looking at Alex Palou and everything that he's done in his short IndyCar career so far, it's been extremely impressive. I don't know if I use the word dynasty yet, but I think Alex Palou and this number 10 team at Dynasty Race, and they can go on a run here if they can keep, the same core together and continue to do what they're doing. I'm sure Alex Palou, knowing how he really wants to perfect his craft, he's probably going to go to work over the offseason and try to figure out what he can do to improve his performance on ovals. I think Alex Palou is already a decent oval racer, but he just hasn't been able to break through and get that maiden oval win yet. But I have a feeling next season we could potentially see Alex Palou finally break through and get that first oval win. And once he gets that first oval win off his back, I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more wins by Alex Palou on ovals. And when we were looking at the schedule heading into this year, it's all the road and street courses. So we know Alex Palou are going to be very strong on those races. And then the ovals, you're like, yeah, he's still good at the ovals, but he's not elite. He's not an elite oval racer yet. And I think Alex Palou is like a step away from being one of the elite oval racers in IndyCar. And once he gets there, like there's going to be, it won't matter whether it's a road course, a street course, a short oval, super speedway. Alex Palou will be able to get the job done regardless of where we're at. And it's just really crazy that he's won the title 3 times in the last 4 years or so. It's just mind blowing. This is something I haven't seen, in quite a while well, I mean, I don't want to say I haven't seen this quite a while in motorsports. We've seen this in other series, but I'm just like in IndyCar in general, to see a driver come in like this, especially so early on in his career, to come in and dominate. Usually you see drivers in the IndyCar series, it takes them a minute to, get up to speed. You see how long it took Joseph Newgarden to get his first title, over a decade to get his first Indy 500. And some of these drivers, they're really good, but and they're very competitive over the years, but they still just can't get that Astor Cup. They just can't get it. But Alex Palou, he has M3, in the last half decade or so, and it just makes me wonder, Joe. You talk about dynasty. I wouldn't say dynasty yet, but but based on what we're looking at right now, I think we're trending in that direction. He could go on a Jimmy Johnson like running IndyCar, and that's crazy to say in such a competitive series.
I mean, Kobe, I gotta 100% agree with you, and you understand why Zach Brown was hoping to get his services, if not for the IndyCar side of things, even for the Formula One side of things, because of the level of talent this kid has. Fastest guy to 3 championships since Sebastian Bourdais. He's the first guy to do it in the post-merger era. But let's talk really quickly about the oval experience and the oval mastery this kid has, because he is like on the cusp of it. Hasn't won yet, but it looked like it was in the cards for him today, and he already has 2 pole positions on the ovals to his name, one of them at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So this guy knows how to drive fast on the ovals. He's just this close from putting a good race together, and we could put it on him being able to avoid bad luck, but it feels like in the past couple of races, be it at Indy or at any of the short ovals, if there's bad luck, it's kind of struck in him there. So if one of the, I don't know if there's any Vindictas he's got to clear or what to get good results on the ovals. It's not even good results, it's wins. This is what success is about in IndyCar. It's not about constantly winning. It's just always being in contention, always getting top 10s, top 5s, podiums, staying out of trouble. And that is what Alex Palou has mastered. So Joe, when we're looking at the big guy at Chip Ganassi still right now, Scott Dixon, and the kind of records he's achieving right now, whether it's beating AJ Foyt on championships, on wins, we've got to ask ourselves 10 years out if these are the kind of numbers that Alex Palou is going to be challenging himself.
And you bring up a couple of great points, Jackson. And when you mentioned F1, one of the things I think some fans remember, especially in the kart era, when we had like Alex Zanardi, who came in, good rookie season, then championship, another championship, but then he went to F1. What could have been if he had stayed in IndyCar longer? What if Montoya had stayed in kart longer? Alex Palou, it seems like unless we see a major shakeup in Formula One, I don't see him going to Formula One anytime too soon. McLaren's not going to welcome him back anytime soon. I don't see any other team. He could really, as you said, do what Scott Dixon did and just start putting up these numbers. And he's so young in his career. He's a threat to be one of the all-time greats and really expand the reach of the sport. DHL, first championship in a long time. They've been involved in IndyCar forever. Ryan Hunter-Reay brought a championship with them long ago. That's paying dividends. We're seeing more Spanish media from Spain covering what he's doing. Especially, you're not exactly getting Alonso up there in championships, but you got this new star, and the racing at times is better. So Alex Palou could easily be up there. And what he's doing, I think this is the start of a dynasty. We got to see what happens, though, because
I got to agree.
Because next year, and this is IndyCar, this is so weird because it's so competitive. It'll be interesting to see if he can keep it up or the others do it, but Ganassi's hard to beat. That said, one of the things, Palou, on paper, is going to show he came in here and beat 2 other drivers because 3 drivers were headlining the championship battle. Scott McLaughlin, he only had a chance really if Alex Palou forgot to show up for the race, like overslept or something. And we saw all the comedic posts of inviting Palou to sushi, skydiving, motorcycle ride. And when Palou will do that now that the race is over. But pretty much, race started, McLaughlin was done. Will Power was almost in a must-win situation. Then the safety belts came undone on lap 12. Game over, 5 laps down, unless Palou was to suddenly crash out the next lap. But it's been interesting looking at Alex Palou's past championship scenarios. In his first year, Long Beach, Pato O'Ward was the big one. Got spun out in the first lap. Car was ruined. He DNF'd. And Joseph Newgarden, must-win situation, and he needed Palou to have a bad race. Too far back, no deal. Last year, Portland, finished the race. He went on to win the race, so game over. And then this year, it was over at lap 12 because of a safety belt, something that Will Power said it just popped. One of those freak incidents. You're going to get evaluated to see why this occurs. A bummer way to see the championship. And I got to ask Jackson, are you surprised that Palou has these championships that sort of come down in a less exciting way? Because it just seems like it's determined a bit early or too early, like last year. Or does this demonstrate sort of how the teams really are under the pressure and they're just everything has to be perfect to beat this guy?
I think it is for sure to an extent pressure, but if we go back just a couple of races here for the whole back half of the season, I mean this with no disrespect at Will Power because the factors today were entirely out of his control. There were a couple of incidents that not just ruined his contentions of a championship, it ruined his teammate Scott McLaughlin's chance. They collided twice, once at Iowa, once on the streets of Toronto. And when you factor in some other outside incidents, the restart tangle at Gateway, there were a couple of little things here that could have just made the spin at Milwaukee during the restart. And when everything adds up like this, could we have maybe been talking about a different championship picture where Power has the lead going into Nashville, and this whole seatbelt thing actually puts him back, but not entirely out of the fight? And I think, again, going back to my point about Palou, there isn't quite that level of aggression that Palou has compared to maybe a Power or a McLaughlin, but there's that level of consistency that is deadly. Quiet consistency.
Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting seeing how Alex Palou's championships have come down. Last year, completely dominant all season, went on a whole bunch of races, and it really seemed like that nobody could go with Alex Palou. And then obviously, Joe, you talked about that championship first year, coming down to the last race like that, but it really seemed like it was in Palou's favor since that was like his type of environment, really good on the street and the road courses and all of that. But like we were just talking about with Palou and the oval tracks, a lot of us were wondering, what is Alex Palou going to do down the stretch? He obviously, when we had the road and street course heavy schedule in the first half of the season, obviously Palou was really good at those tracks, and then oval heavy last part of the season. We're wondering, could Alex Palou withstand the pressure of his competitors and end up getting it done? And Alex Palou was just good enough, to remain consistent, make smart decisions in points race, and end up holding the championship at the end of the year. And like we've been saying, this guy he's very young, early in his career, and the scary part is, if Alex Palou is this good right now, what's he going to be like 3, 4, 5 years from now? He's not even close to reaching his prime and his full potential as a driver. Imagine what Alex Palou is going to be like when he's in the prime of his career, the best that he's going to get as a race car driver. That's why I'm wondering, how many more championships could this guy win? Could we see Alex Palou, go on a run and win multiple championships in a row? Could we see him potentially, get up to the magical number of 7? Because it seems like in all racing championships worldwide, once you get to 7, you don't really go to 8 or any more like that. I just thought Palou handled this championship season extremely well. Very dominant in the first half of the season on the road and street courses, got some strong finishes, podiums, and then second half of the season, he was able to manage as best as he could and got the strong, consistent finishes that we typically see from him. So definitely a job well done. And in regards to Will Power, how unfortunate, that situation happened with him. I mean, I honestly thought Alex Palou was still going to win the championship, regardless of what happened today with Will Power. But you really like, to see that go down to the end with him and Will Power both battling on track for position. So Will Power, just playing catch up and just hoping, that something, really crazy would happen for him to try to get back into this championship fight. At that point, after the belts coming down, Will Power needed to hope that Alex Palou would have a mechanical issue or get in a crash and then have a race of attrition, a historic race of attrition to try to get up there and win a race. But unfortunately, it just wasn't in the cards. It's just a shame, that the belts come undone, and ironically, that was what cost AJ Allmendinger the Indy 500 when he had these belts come undone that day. So I guess history repeating itself, but in different circumstances. I think you're muted, Joe.
There we go. This different circumstances, one of those deals where for Alex Palou. It worked out in his favor. Willpower. I was just it was just unfortunate, as you say, just to see the championship sort of come down this way. But at the end of the day, I gotta say, Willpower, what an effort this season, but not good enough. Like Colton Herta, who finally we talked about Alex Palou, and is he good enough in the ovals? Well, Colton Herta, he finally has his oval win at the National Super Speedway. A great battle with Pato Award for the win. I thought he was gonna hit Stingray Rob. I was convinced, like from the camera angle, it looked like, oh, this is gonna end under caution. It's over. But when he got around and was right there, just barely ahead, what a move by Colton Herta to get this win. First oval win, and now second place in the championship because of Willpower's mess. Got far enough ahead of Scott McLaughlin. For our regular viewers, as they know, Jackson, you are the winner of the Battle of Mids with Alex, because Colton Herta, he has outperformed Willpower, but still Willpower fourth in the points. Overall, Kobe, starting with you, are we starting to see the potential that maybe we're anticipating after Colton Herta got his first win? Because right now, Colton Herta, 24 years old, he's been racing. He got his first win when he was, 18? So people thought, oh, he's going to be a championship contender. That has not been the case. But now, do you feel like entering this offseason, Colton Herta is on that short list to be a championship contender in 2025?
Well, and in the season finale, with the win in spectacular fashion, especially in front of his now hometown crowd, since he is a resident of Nashville, Tennessee, I think all the momentum is on Colton Herta's side heading into 2025. And I do think Alex Palou is obviously going to be the main championship favorite heading into next season, but I think Colton Herta, is finally figuring things out. I know throughout this season he's shown some moments of brilliance and still some rough patches that he still needs to work through. But I really think Colton Herta is starting to develop into a well-rounded driver where he can go out there, he can win on the road and street courses and on the ovals as well. And finally got that long-awaited IndyCar oval win today. Well, definitely a well-deserved effort. There was a fun battle at the end between him and Pato Award, and Colton Herta came out on top. And if this happened a few years ago, I hate to say it, but maybe Colton Herta doesn't win this race. Maybe he finishes second, or he ends up in the wall crash like we've seen time and time again in the past. But Colton Herta showed patience, and he made the move at the right time and ended up capitalizing on it. So a job well done for him. And also, I think based on what we've seen this year from Andretti Global in general, downsizing to 3 full-time teams was the right move for this organization. Obviously when they had 4 cars, I thought they were being stretched very thin there. Yeah, so I thought downsizing and all of that really helped them out a lot. Colton Herta, definitely a solid season for him. Carl Kirkwood had strong moments all throughout the year, and Marcus Ericsson, that number 28 team. If I had to make any suggestions, maybe they could consider making some changes over the off season, because that team has not, performed up to the level of the 26 and the 27 at all this year. And as we saw today, Ericsson getting into the wall, that would basically just summarize what his 2024 season has been. Just they've shown the speed at times, but it's just been a season of missed opportunities. So I think that's probably going to be the one team where Andretti wants to focus on over the off season. But getting back to Colton Herta, I think sky's the limit for him. I think he can finally turn into that driver that we've been talking about, in the last few years, when he was rumored to be a potential F1 driver, go over there at the pinnacle of motorsports and do extremely well. Yeah, but in the last few years or so, with all the mistakes that he's been making, he's kind of fallen off the F1 radar. But if he keeps putting up these great performances, you could potentially start to hear those conversations start up again. But as we know in Formula One, once you start getting older, creeping up there in age towards your late 20s, early 30s, Formula One teams are not going to be looking at you. But if he doesn't ever go to Formula One, that's perfectly fine, because I think he can certainly, continue to have a wonderful career in the IndyCar Series, continue to win a lot more races, and potentially, win several championships like Alex Palou's already done.
No, 100%. And going back to Marcus Ericsson, I'm not entirely sure if that was kind of the similar mechanical failure that Kirkwood had during the night practice, or if that was his own fault, but it is just reflective of a season of showing pace and just things weren't going quite his way, factors outside of his control, which has been teething issues for Ericsson and that crew in the 28. But I think you could argue a lot of the same with Colton Herta, like had some great pace, and there was some things that just did not work out his way, whether it was bad strategy calls, hiccups in the pit lane. And there were some things that were absolutely his fault. Detroit, where he locked it up in the rain, like that's entirely his fault. I think going back to Circuit of the Americas 2019, when he has that win, I think there's instantly an expectation of you are now F1 potential. You need to turn this into consistent wins. And that's why I think we saw that constant level of aggression, of overdriving from Herta. And I think we've seen him learn how to dial it back just enough where he can turn that into really, really good results. And I think Toronto this year, combining his skills with the absolute rocket ship Andretti gives him on street circuits, I think it was just such a confidence booster for him. So I'm kind of with you, Kobe, because Palou is absolutely the favorite, I think, going into the championship. But you guys can go watch the press conference after this, and even he was like, I don't know, it's close with everybody up front. So I would not be surprised for Herta to be another runner-up, if not in that championship spot next year. Oh, also, the great thing, or the terrible thing about this whole Battle of Mid thing, there are no winners. There are only losers. And I think Colton Herta, Will Power, and I think more importantly, both Alex Anderson and myself are both the losers in this case.
They had great seasons. It's just interesting. Of course, anybody can look back what their preseason predictions are, and some of them were hits, some of them were not. One of the things, I think you bring up a good point about, hey, you won at COTA, you got to think about F1, and now you just focus on what you're doing, focus on the races, don't do anything, just get the point. Because you mentioned in that press conference, Alex Palou said he wasn't exactly great this season. They were just good. If he was great, boy, is he going to be hard to beat. But each and every week, the competition in IndyCar is just so hard to win. And he did it with just 2 wins this year, Alex Palou. Drivers that got more wins, they don't have the consistency like Palou. So that is going to go a long way. If Colton Herta could step that up, I think he could be a championship contender. I also got to say, too, Scott McLaughlin is on my short list as well, because he is showing he could win anywhere, and he's dangerously fast. And the highest finishing Penske driver this year in the points. 2024 IndyCar Series season, that's going to be, I think, highly remembered. Well, for Alex Palou, easily 3-time champion, first time as a father as well. But let's be honest, too, as the season has now come to an end, we saw some positive moments on the racetrack. I feel Nashville was a good one. I got to be honest, seeing those cars under the lights yesterday was just so spectacular. It's like, please make this a night race. But we also know there was plenty of controversy that overshadowed the season. Disqualifications after St. Pete, off the track controversies as well, rumors about the sport direction, comments that poorly reflect on IndyCar management, all sorts of stuff that I feel was distracting. But overall, Jackson, especially you've been to several IndyCar events this year for us, how would you remember the 2024 IndyCar season? What would you be looking forward to in the off season?
I think, first of all, I think we're going to be, for me personally, I'm going to remember 2024 as the season of the step up. And I mean that in a lot of different ways, whether it was addressing management in a lot of unique ways. You know, just the absolute turnaround at Milwaukee of Mark Miles in the whole billboard statement, converting that into Pato's win. But him saying that, I think it was 1,200 or 12,000, a very low number was going to be his goal for attendance in Milwaukee. And we blew out the stands, absolute sellout crowd. And then you look at the start of the season where we make the move over to Nashville Superspeedway. Marshall Pruitt says this race can and has to succeed for IndyCar's future on ovals. And Scott Borchetta and that whole Music City Grand Prix team puts together not just one of the best presentations, but manages to pack the house in Tennessee to make this happen. I think it's just been a lot of stepping up on that side. And you look at some of the drivers who've stepped up. I think Santino Ferrucci did a fantastic job Best AJ Foyt driver since 2004, 11 top 10s. David Malukas, after losing his seat with McLaren, comes back with Shank, gets consistently really good results up front with that team, gets a full-time ride with AJ Foyt. Felix Rosenquist, first pole position for Mike Shank Racing. So for me, in 2025, it's going to be all eyes on those two teams, Meyer Shank Racing and AJ Foyt. That partnership with Malukas, Ferrucci, and Penske is still going to remain. Shank's moving from an Andretti to Ganassi partnership, and we know that both of these guys are fast. How are they going to step up, Kobe, to potentially turn that from podiums, top fives into wins?
Yeah, definitely a lot to look forward to into the 2025 season. But looking at the current season that just concluded, I see it as a season, with highs and lows. But I guess you get that with any season, and started at a low point at the beginning of the year. St. Pete when Joseph Newgarden and Scott McLaughlin, disqualified from the Firestone Grand Prix with the push to pass controversy that happened there. And then that kind of left I don't want to say a black eye, but it definitely had a cloud hanging above their heads, and especially Team Penske and all of that. And then you saw a lot of angry people inside the IndyCar paddock, and we even saw driver intros of Blue Barber. All the drivers were standing together, and Joseph Newgarden was kind of just like standing off to the side all by himself. And it's been really nice throughout the season, for Joseph, to go from like being a man on the island alone, to finally getting accepted back into the driver's circle where the drivers are actually talking to you and all of that. And then his Indy 500 win. Let's talk about that. That definitely has to be one of the highlights of this season. That move around the outside on the final lap, heading into turn 3, that was just spectacular. I don't know many drivers who would have made such a bold move like that. It just shows you that he was absolutely going for it, that he didn't care, if he ended up, turning down in the paddock, hitting the wall and crashing out hard. That's what it means to win the Indianapolis 500. You're willing to do whatever it takes so you can cross that yard of bricks at the end of lap 200 at the 500-mile mark, so you can end up kissing the bricks and have your name heads onto the Borg-Warner trophy. So that is definitely one of the highlight moments of the season for me. Yeah, and there's, like I say, lots of good moments like that, lots of down moments like the push to pass thing, and also really nice to see how Pato O'Ward turned the Pato Who thing, into a thing where he's actually selling merchandise. And I believe Marshall Pruitt showed that there's a billboard in Speedway, Indiana.
We're getting one in Speedway. I cannot wait.
Yeah, that says Pato Who on it. I think everyone knows who Pato O'Ward is now, especially since he's going to be driving the McLaren Formula One car in Free Practice 1 during the Mexico City Grand Prix race weekend. So that's very exciting for Pato. I know he was saying that after he finished at Nashville, he was going to go fly to Europe to the factory in McLaren so he can prepare for his F1 duties, because I know the F1 fans in Mexico City, they're not just going to be excited to see Sergio Perez if he's there. We'll talk about that a little bit in the Formula One section, but also to see Pato O'Ward there as well. Really exciting for him. And also Jennifer from the Associated Press says, since the Pato Who comments, since the Pato Who thing become a thing, Mark Miles actually traveled to Mexico City to try to, speak with the organizers there at Autodroma Hermanos Rodriguez to potentially have an IndyCar race. And some of the reporting suggests that could happen as early as 2026. So really a good thing if we're able to get an IndyCar race in Mexico City, because like I've said on previous shows, Pato O'Ward is, he's I think he's one of these stars in IndyCar who can transcend the sport and take it to the next level, given he is, their most popular driver in the series. Pato has so many fans, and if you don't believe me, go to his Instagram page, look at it, look at his posts, look at the comments down in there. Fans absolutely love Pato, not just Instagram. Look at all his social media. Pato is, known internationally, and people just absolutely love him. So if you have this star right here and you market him correctly, I think IndyCar, can really, do some great things, and not just Pato, some of the other stars as well. You mentioned Jackson Santino Ferrucci. He's had a spectacular season as well. Get in the top 10 in points for AJ Foyt. That's just extremely impressive. And then to lock him down for another year, and David Malukas, Foyt enters 2025 with their strongest driver lineup in I don't know how long. It's been a long time since JJ Foyt has had a driver lineup of Ferrucci and Malukas that provides so much potential. And I'd say year one of the Foyt Penske Alliance went extremely well. And it makes me wonder, what's year two going to bring? I know the expectations are going to be a lot higher now. Yeah, get both cars in the top 10. Maybe try to shoot for a win with Santino Ferrucci at one of the oval tracks. I'm sure the Indianapolis 500 is probably going to be towards the top of his list since he runs extremely well in that race. So there's definitely a lot to be excited about. I just hope that as we go into the offseason, IndyCar will continue to have that positive momentum instead of, like the up and down nature we saw all throughout the year, especially with the hybrids. I think we're getting, as it started actually last offseason during testing with these hybrids, and then it didn't really go well. And some of the drivers were saying that if we ran this at St. Pete, maybe 5 or 6 cars would finish the race. And since the second half of the season when it debuted at Mid Ohio, we've had a few issues with the hybrid, but thankfully it hasn't been catastrophic. And as I said on a few shows ago, I believe as IndyCar continues to develop this hybrid system that any drop in the on-track product that we saw at several of the races, the teams are going to work on it, and it's just going to get better from here. So I think overall the new hybrid engine has really done a solid job for the most part without any major issues. So really looking forward to what we can do in 2025. Just don't want to have the up and down nature like we saw starting last offseason all throughout this season, and really want to keep it on the more positive side of things.
That's the big hope. More positive thing for IndyCar up ahead. I mean, we're getting a new team next year with Prima in it. We got more races, of course, more team combinations. I'm thinking, especially since you mentioned about David Malukas going to AJ Foyt Racing and how good they are in Indianapolis. David Malukas could be a contender at the Indy 500 with AJ Foyt, him and Santino. 100%. That could be a huge day for that team.
He hasn't quite had the time on super speedways outside of Indy like we've seen with Santino. But if it's anything like we've seen him be on the short ovals, it's going to be something special.
Yeah. Not with Dale Coyne Racing anymore. That was hit or miss. It seems to depend on the year Dale Coyne Racing has. This year, Dale Coyne Racing, they're probably just excited, let's rebuild for next year. So, but it'll be really interesting. Of course, any offseason news, development, Kobe at Grid Tonight with the Grid Tonight crew, they'll be reporting it for IndyCar. What a season of IndyCar. We're looking forward to 2025. But for 2024, Kobe, Formula One, I think this season is ramping up now.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. And one last note before I go to Formula One, I want to add one last IndyCar note. I believe Ed Carpenter's gamble paid off. In the leader circle, able to put Christian Rasmussen there and just barely get, into the leader circle there. Yeah,
it's the hard thing for Ed to do since he's supposed to be the oval guy, but to admit that maybe I'm not the guy who can do this and I should let my rookie flex some muscle and to bring home that $1 million. Kobe could not agree more.
Yeah, so definitely a tough call for Ed Carpenter. We talked about it on Grid Tonight for him to say that, I'm not the driver I used to be. Maybe we should put someone out there who can give us the best chance to be in the leader circle and to get the end of season bonus. It paid off because that number 20 Ed Carpenter Racing Chevrolet edged Stingray Rob's number 41, by a small margin. So job well done there by that number 20 team and Christian Rasmussen for finishing out the year on a strong note as that team hopes to continue improving heading into next season. And we'll close the chapter on this IndyCar season. We'll talk about the continuation of the 2024 Formula One World Championship season. And today they stopped at Baku City for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And we often call Baku the Talladega of the Formula One schedule because of how unpredictable it is and all the crazy things we see. And this Grand Prix did not disappoint at all with plenty of action and a change in the Constructors' Championship that we all pretty much predicted here on this show, for the last several weeks or a month or so. And at the end of the day, it was Oscar Piastri getting the victory for McLaren, with Lando Norris going from 15th on the grid to 4th after other drivers were penalized. McLaren now has a 20-point lead in the Constructors because Red Bull came home in 5th with Max Verstappen, and Sergio Perez's podium hopes went away on the second to last lap when he and Carlos Sainz crashed together. Ferrari is 51 points behind McLaren and 31 behind Red Bull. Joe, is this a three-way battle for the Constructors, or does one team appear to be the clear favorite?
Right now, it looks like McLaren is a clear favorite. It just really matters what Ferrari does. If Ferrari comes out strong and fast, hey, guess what? We got a battle on hand. I mean, Charles Leclerc could have easily won this race. He was just outgunned by Oscar Piastri. I mean, Oscar Piastri, brilliant drive. That overtaken move, just breaking so late and just pushing it to the limit to where Charles Leclerc used up his tires. that's where I feel, hey, this is Ferrari showing they could get the job done. They could have easily had a Ferrari podium with second and third. Unfortunately, that last caution ruined it for them. But Ferrari is there. I think they can make this a 3-week battle. Just how good could they execute? Red Bull, I almost tempted to say I feel like they're the third place team right now.
I 100% have to agree with you, Joe. It feels like Red Bull has fallen off significantly since the start of the season, especially since, I mean, I think the big turning point here has been the first win here for Piastri. And I'm not sure. I think the big factor is going to be one, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but how well Perez can execute on bringing their title hopes back. And I think the other big thing is papaya rules for not just for the Drivers' Championship, but for the Constructors' Championship. You'd have to imagine how south this could go if Norris and Piastri at some point get into each other fighting for a lead, and just how much that could potentially hurt them. But I think it's if anything right now, it's looking like it's McLaren's to lose and potentially Ferraris with some good running from both of those guys to maybe upset them.
Yeah, and imagine if we said at the beginning of the year that that McLaren would be the clear favorite in the constructors, that Red Bull was potentially becoming the third best team on the grid. Which is really really stunning when you really think about the dominance that we've seen from Red Bull in the last handful of years or so. Yeah, but like I was saying, we really saw this coming. We'll get into those reasons in just a little bit. But for Red Bull, it looked like Perez was going to be able to deliver a podium after a good race, stand behind the lead battle between Piastri and Charles Leclerc. But after a failed move on Leclerc, pushed wide, Sainz got around, and after turn 2, got an inside. However, the two collided and crashed when Perez's right front contacted Sainz's left rear. So unfortunate situation there. Jackson, do you believe that this was just a racing incident, or do you put one of the drivers at fault here?
It's two guys not doing the right thing. I can definitely say that. You could argue why Perez was holding his line in the middle of the track and not going lower. You could also argue why Sainz was even trying to squeeze on the outside in the first place. I think it was two guys assuming the other individual was going to do something completely different. So if you want to call that a racing incident, sure. But I just think I want to hear what Joe has to say about this, because I think for me I'd argue it was a racing incident. It's hard to place the blame anywhere other than 50-50.
I feel this was a little bit of a racing incident, especially when we saw Perez try to make that pass on the outside. I almost got the sense he was a little bit timid and he did it completely. He could have pushed it harder on Leclerc. Gets pushed wide, allows for Carlos Sainz, but Carlos Sainz gets wide. Perez comes on the inside. Now, if you remember what happened in Monaco to Perez, he was ahead of that Haas and the two of them crashed. I feel like this is almost role reverse, where it's like, okay, Perez is now behind. Lap after lap, they tend to go away from the wall, follow that car, get that slipstream. Could Carlos Sainz done a better job checking the mirrors? Okay, Perez is there. I probably should hold my line. Potentially. Could Perez have said, hey, he's drifting over, maybe I should move over? Maybe, but I feel like this is more of a racing incident because we're not just going to say, oh, you should have backed out. That's the last thing, race over. You're going to lose that podium finish, whoever backed off, because we were down to what I believe the last 2 laps, and that was leading up to a DRS zone. So yeah, I think this is a racing incident. I can see how people will try to point the fingers at either driver, but really, if you're going to try to say somebody should be at fault, somebody should get a penalty, then you're taking away what's good hard racing. And with good hard racing, sometimes you're just going to have an incident like this.
Yeah, unfortunately, these things just happen. And while we may consider it a racing incident, I don't know if Red Bull really feels the same way, especially since Sergio Perez is on an extremely short leash coming out of the summer break. And we've talked time and time again how Sergio Perez is going to continue to be under pressure from Red Bull, especially since he's been struggling for the longest time now and still hasn't been able to regain, his full potential as a race car driver, as his form has, continued to underwhelm. So Joe, does losing the constructors lead after Baku and and losing that podium finish as well, do you think this could put Sergio Perez's seat at risk? I know Red Bull were talking about they're going to make a decision heading into the summer break on Sergio Perez, and they decided to keep him in the car. And when we talked about that on the Grid Tonight show, we were saying that just because they said that he was in there the rest of the season, that's not necessarily the case. Because we know Red Bull can be very, very ruthless, and they still have Liam Lawson, waiting in the wings, as a potential backup option. And I just wonder, what is Red Bull going to do?
My prediction is Singapore Grand Prix is next. This is the last chance for Sergio Perez to prove he's worthy of keeping that seat. Because we know Red Bull last year, Singapore struggled. They probably are going to be in a little bit of trouble, but that's a track where Sergio Perez has good results at before. He needs to show he truly is the king of the streets. He could have been third place. Really, he could have been even second place. You got to remember, he got held up by Lando Norris playing the team game for Oscar Piastri. He doesn't need to continue on this slump that has been going so long that now they don't have the constructors lead. It just sort of makes me interested, just wondering what's going on, because we know there was that rumor about F1 management saying you got to keep Perez because of the attendance in the Mexico City Grand Prix. I can understand there's always pressure. You would not want to put Perez out of the seat because he brings sponsorship money too. He brings fans' attention. He's all over the place. But at the cost of now you lost the constructors. And a team that, as you said, Kobe, they've given Pierre Gasly the, hey, you're out. They've given Alex Albon, you're out. Perez, he lived up to it for the last couple of seasons, second place in the championship. That's the highest you could go, really, because he's not going to overtake Max Verstappen. But now he lost another position. He is just on this downhill trend, and I really got to say, I just don't think you could keep him around. Like, honestly, if I was Red Bull, I'd be thinking maybe we don't need him at Singapore. That's a track where we weren't exactly that great last year. Could we really anticipate Sergio Perez to lead a Red Bull effort at Singapore? They could probably prove us wrong. It's a very technical track, so you don't have the high speeds. That could be an advantage for Red Bull this time. But I'm just sort of, I guess, confused that, you guys had the constructors lead. You're to the point where we had a summer break. It was at risk. You kept Perez in there. Monza, as we said, McLaren could have easily left with it, but they didn't. And I thought, well, maybe Red Bull do something. They did it, and now they lost it. And there's people predicting they lost it for good, and I feel that way. And I really think Perez, Singapore is his last chance. And honestly, I'm just still sort of surprised Red Bull are keeping him still.
So here's the issue with replacing Perez, because I think there has obviously been talks in the Red Bull camp about replacing him. I think the issue you need to realize is, can Helmut Marko and Red Bull Racing honestly look at your two V-carb guys, Sonoda and Ricciardo, and genuinely say they will be more consistent? Faster, yes, but will they be more consistent than Sergio Perez? And I think maybe, but is that a risk you're willing to take, and doing such a massive shakeup at this point in the season? I think the risks outweigh the rewards at this point in the season. But I think I'm 100% with you, Joe. I think there's not a lot I can add on because you hit it to a T. But I think if it's not Singapore, it's going to be a couple more races in here where they might need to bring someone else in to really get this construction title fight really, really going.
Yeah, and for all the people out there who say that Red Bull will at least let Sergio Perez run the Mexican Grand Prix at his home race and then drop him immediately after that, I just want to remind you what happened to Nick de Vries. They literally dropped him one race before the Dutch Grand Prix. If they wouldn't even let Nick de Vries, run one final Grand Prix race in front of his home fans, what makes you think that they're going to let Sergio Perez, run to run one final race with the team before cutting them loose, and then we're at the end of the season when you get to the Mexican Grand Prix. So only a handful of races left to go, and I guess at that point, a change really doesn't make any sense. And I think like the later we go into the season, it really doesn't make sense, to make a change. But we've seen Red Bull make decisions before that didn't make any sense. So I guess it wouldn't be a first if they do decide to change Sergio Perez late in the year. But I think if they do want to make a change, they need to do it soon because time is running out. And, try to throw Liam Lawson in the end. I don't even know what they would do. Would they put Daniel Ricciardo in a second Red Bull car and put Lawson in Visa Cash App RB? Or would they, just simply just throw out Perez and put Liam Lawson? I kind of don't want Liam Lawson to be put in, that type of position, especially since he is so young and still inexperienced.
He doesn't deserve that pressure.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, totally agree with that. I'd be a little nervous if they put Liam Lawson in that seat. I feel like he'd probably be better suited, driving for the RB team, and then later on, go up to the Red Bull team. And I still never understand why Red Bull doesn't think that Yuki Tsunoda could be an option. To be a teammate for Max Verstappen. And whenever I hear Helmut Marko talking about Yuki, it's typically in a negative way. So I guess Yuki's not really one of his favorites.
We'll see him at Aston Martin in 2 years then.
Yeah, but who's going to replace Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll?
There's a sports car program coming for Aston Martin. Fernando's getting up there in age. Pick your poison.
Yeah, we had that discussion on Grid Tonight just a few days ago when we were talking about Adrian Newey coming in. We talked about the sports car program. Lance Stroll loves sports car racing. That could be a great home for him. But also, if you have Adrian Newey come in designing new cars, if you're Lance Stroll, you want to see what can you do in an Adrian Newey design car? So we're wondering if that would prolong Lance Stroll's stay in Formula One. But I guess that's a conversation for another day. But it is going to be interesting to see what Sergio Perez's future is going to look like, whether he stays or he goes. But I'll say this: I'll be surprised if Sergio Perez is actually on the grid at the start of the 2025 Formula One season. I'll be very surprised if that's the case. But I actually would not be surprised if they let him finish out the year at the very least. But now let's talk about the 7th and 8th place finishers. Williams ended up scoring double points thanks to Alex Albon and Franco Colapinto, despite mistakes in practice and qualifying. Williams ended the weekend on a high note. The team is now 3 points ahead of Alpine in the constructors' standings. Jackson, 2 races into his young Formula One career, are you convinced that dropping Logan Sargent for Colapinto was the right move?
I mean, the guys scored double Logan's points in a fraction of the time. So by nature, yes. If I were to play devil's advocate, I could be saying that he's been given the priority on parts and upgrades maybe Logan never got. Granted, Logan was crashing a ton, but you look at the kind of tracks that Colapinto has driven at for Williams so far, and I'm not even going to try making this a comparison to drafting tracks in NASCAR, but it's a lot of the car doing the talking. Monza and Azerbaijan, 2 of the longest straightaways, and I think it's already been an incredibly promising start for this Argentinian's career. But I think the real test here is going to be at Singapore. Very, very, drivers say year in, year out, it's the hardest on them just in endurance and in technicality. So don't get me wrong. I think he's already doing a fantastic job as a replacement for Sargent. Full-time driver, though, I think Singapore is going to be a fantastic test of that.
The Singapore will be that test. But the one thing I think this is something we talk about in other forms of motorsports as well, too. That chemistry and that motivation behind the pit garage is very important. And one thing I noticed today after the race on Williams' social media page, a picture of Alex Albon, Franco, both of them holding their little pit boards. They both scored points, and there's a team. That is motivating. That is hugely rewarding for this team that has had a pretty rough year. They've had some good opportunities in past races where we saw Albon got points, but unfortunately, Logan Sargent, mistakes. This is his second year. I think he was under a tremendous amount of pressure. We know how he just got in Formula One after Formula Two, the pressure of performing, and it just seemed to snowball to the point where Now you have a new driver here. Yeah, he made a mistake earlier this weekend, but look what he did. Fast, got points, and at the end, that is motivating for our team. That team has to be feeling really good entering Singapore. Singapore is going to be, I think, brutal for Williams because their car, we always know, whether it was Monza, Belgium, here, those long straights, it loves that. Monza, it didn't exactly show up. This year, it really showed up at Baku. And you got to remember, Baku last year, the two of them, they didn't score points. So it wasn't like they were expected to always come here and score points. They missed the mark last year, but this year they got it with the two drivers. That's hugely rewarding. I think, I hate to say it, it was, I think, the right move at this time to drop Logan Sargent because at the end of the day, Franco, what he did, that's great. Got the team up ahead in the constructors a little bit. Alpine's a mess. You got Carlos Sainz coming in. You really want to start getting this team going the right way, not focusing on repairs, getting ready so that way it's not a good spot when Carlos Sainz comes in.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Logan Sargent was spotted inside the IndyCar paddock this weekend at Nashville Super Speedway. So I guess he's hunting for his next opportunity in racing. And if he comes to IndyCar, I'll be really happy to welcome him home here with, open arms and all of that. But I have to say, this is really hard for me to say right now, Joe Jackson. But if Logan Sargent was in that Williams today in Baku, we wouldn't be talking about a double points finish for Williams. I hate to say that, but I believe a lot of people would definitely agree with that. But Franco Colapinto, 2 races in Formula One, been extremely impressed with everything that I've seen. I know when Williams announced that he was going to be replacing Sargent, a lot of people were like, "Who is Franco Colapinto? I've never heard of Franco Colapinto. Like, who is this guy? Why didn't they choose him, or why didn't they choose this driver?" Yeah, but Franco Colapinto is, proven that Williams' faith in him was absolutely correct, and he shows that, just 2 races under his belt, that he belongs in Formula One, that he deserves to be in a Formula One car full time. I just think it's a shame, that he's performing so well right now, and he's not even going to be on the grid in 2025. So he'd probably have a shot of potentially coming to the grid in 2026, but we'll just have to wait and see there. But I think it's super unfortunate, that this kid is, exceeding a lot of people's expectations, and right now everything is really looking up for him. We'll see how it goes, later on in the season, if he can continue to be close to Albon in performance, and when the situation arises, be able to score points for Williams. Will he be able to not make, a lot of the same mistakes that Logan Sargent made and extract more out of the car? Yeah, so there's still a lot to look forward to with Franco Colapinto later in the year, see how he does with a lot more races under his belt. But like you're saying, Joe, at the moment, it seems like Colapinto getting into the seat was the absolute right decision. I believe you have something you want to add, Jackson?
Yeah, I mean this with absolutely no shots fired at you, but it just felt like the vibe of Kyle Kirkwood the vibes of Sargent being there was longtime friends with Kyle Kirkwood, both Floridians, got the invite from Andretti Global to go watch. I mean, that could be going somewhere, but again, it feels like everything that I've heard about Sargent making the move to IndyCar is still a big maybe right now. Meanwhile, you look at Toby Sori, who has had some fantastic resume drives at Portland and a couple other places this year. He is someone who has been watching a couple of the past races and a guy I know who's actively searching. So I'm not saying it's impossible that we could potentially see him in IndyCar in the next couple of years. It's just this weekend did not look like that was kind of the vibe of what Logan was doing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing your perspective there, Jackson. And you are an IndyCar insider, so I'll always tip my hat to you when it comes to all IndyCar stuff. And adding to Red Bull's woes, next weekend, you've already talked about it. The Singapore Grand Prix last year, Red Bull wasn't good at all. They're missing out on the podium. Sainz, Norris, and Hamilton finished on the podium last year in Singapore. Max Verstappen's winless streak is now at 7, the longest since 2020. And if Max Verstappen does not win the Singapore Grand Prix, can you believe we'll be sitting at 3 months without a Max Verstappen win, which is something I did not think I'd ever say in the year 2024. Starting with you, Joe, what does Red Bull do this week to prepare for Singapore? I have a feeling, if I was in the Red Bull factory, I'd be dreading this week because this is obviously like one of their worst tracks in the entire F1 calendar.
Yeah, after last year, you got to feel like this is one of their worst tracks, but they have to really just focus on, okay, what have we done that has worked for the tracks we're good at? That's the best thing they could do for Singapore. They've had success here in the past. It's just not last year at all. They don't have the car when it comes to the top speed. Well, there's what, 20, 22 corners at Singapore? A lot of corners. It's going to be hot. It's a night race. They could really just focus on having that good handling car to take those corners faster. That could be their strength. I think this is a good opportunity for them, potentially, mainly Max. I'm sorry, I just don't have the confidence in Sergio Perez right now. Max to try to get a podium, maybe third place. Ferrari's going to be hard to beat. McLaren's going to be hard to beat. He could beat out of those four. I think he could beat at least one of them, potentially both of them. One from each team. Either the Ferrari don't show up. I think McLaren's the favorite. Red Bull, I think, have a tall task. At the end of the day, they just got to focus on what they've done good at, like they do in other races where they have won.
Yeah, and I wish we were talking in a more optimistic way about Perez, because in past he's been incredibly good at these kinds of street circuits like Saudi Arabia. Like I wish we weren't in this kind of scenario, but I think it's going to be a matter of what did Adrian Newey do from the drawing board in reaction to that? Did they put more eggs in the flat track basket? Did they make that car better on the more traditional tracks? Data would argue yes, after what happened in the opening rounds here. Or did we see him maybe go back and, try and address some of those issues and what kind of kept that car bogged down last year? So I think we're not going to know a lot about car performance until we actually get back there. But I think I think if anything, we're going to be able to look back and say Red Bull probably got some pretty good data from that weekend, if anything, on how to address that, especially in a team that's eventually not going to have Adrian Newey.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a long week ahead for Red Bull. We'll see how they respond. They may surprise us and go out and win the Singapore Grand Prix. Will Sergio Perez reclaim his title as king of the streets? Like you say, Joe, don't really have much confidence in that right now. Can Max Verstappen finally break this winless streak that is totally unexpected? So his winless streak doesn't go into the third month. Still a lot to watch out for in Formula One, and we'll close the book on this race weekend in F1. We'll move on to Supercars, which has one of their enduros, the Sandown 500.
The Sandown 500 weekend, first Enduro, and Will Brown from the pole won the Sandown 500, proving he is still in this championship fight after a couple quiet races. Talks about, Triple A has been caught up. Well, Triple A racing first and second place, Kobe. Overall, I gotta say, when it comes to Supercar Series, this was a fun race to watch. We've seen Triple A; they were pretty smooth sailing compared to some of the several championship contenders having issues throughout the race. Does this build a confidence for Triple A as we approach a track they're really good at, the Bathurst 1000?
I think it's safe to say that Triple Eight is back, right? Because the last few races, it seemed like this team has been out to lunch. Yeah, Triple Eight had a strong start to the season for Will Brown and Brock Feeney, but after that strong start, it seemed like they kind of cooled off a little bit as the Ford teams caught up, and good thing Brown and Feeney had that big lead, because otherwise they might be a little bit in trouble championship wise. But thankfully, they went to work over the last few race weekends or so since they really struggled, and Sandown come around, absolutely dominant performance. From Will Brown. Scott Pye did an excellent job in his co-driver role. Just like everything went extremely well for Triple Eight. And while they were out front, really controlled this race, I thought we saw a lot of great racing throughout the Sandown 500. The racing was close, so quite a bit of passing, and also it was very chaotic. So the best place in this race was to be out front, because we saw, quite a handful of safety cars, a lot more safety cars than we usually see in a Supercars race. I remember Sandown last year, relatively calm race, lots of long running, but in this race, we didn't see those long runs that we usually see here. we saw basically cautions breed cautions. You know, a lot of drivers making mistakes, and I say if this is the one race to get all the mistakes out of your system, is this one, because the next one is the premier crown jewel race of Australia, the Great Race, the Bathurst 1000. Yeah, so I'm really glad that Supercars were able to have this enduro once again at the Sandown 500 to get these drivers, you know, the opportunity they need to, you know, work through any of the kinks and some of the mistakes before you get to Mount Panorama, because you don't want to have some of the things that we saw here happen when they get to the mountain. Because I thought, you know, overall we saw some great racing, but also some of the standards we saw on the racetrack from some of the drivers, it was just extremely sloppy in my opinion. But one team that was not sloppy was Triple Eight. So I think the performance we saw from the 87 and the 88, that does build a lot of confidence heading into the Bathurst 1000.
And AAA being confident at Bathurst 1000, I think, is trouble for everyone, because really we have 3 race weekend, 5 races remaining. You got the Bathurst 1000, 300 points for winning that race. Then we have the Gold Coast, Surfers Paradise, 2 races, 150 points each, and then Adelaide, the final 2 races. 5 drivers left in this championship hunt. Of course, Will Brown, the points leader. Chaz Monster is in second place, but there's Brock Feeney in third, the teammate of Will Brown, Cam Waters, and Matthew Payne. Overall, for Will Brown, 4 wins this year. He's, of course, leading the championship. A lot of folks anticipate he is probably the favorite to win, but out of the 5 drivers total, what other drivers do you see as legitimate contenders for this championship?
I said, well, I'm looking at the championship standings right now, and I think right now your realistic championship contenders are going to be your top 3: Will Brown, Chaz Monster, and Brock Feeney. Looking where Cam Waters and Matt Payne's at right now. I think you're going to need to see a Will Brown, Mostert, and Feeney, you know, run into trouble at Bathurst, you know, completely blow it at the Gold Coast, and then have a disastrous Adelaide. I think that's probably the only way you're going to see those 2 Ford drivers, you know, battle for the championship. But I think right now we get to the back end of the schedule in the enduro season. I really think that the Triple Eight teammates Brown and Feeney are probably going to be your premier championship favorites, but definitely do not count out Chaz Monster at all. We've seen Chaz Monster, you know, really turning on this year. You know, after like a couple of down years or so, really seeing like Chaz is back. This team has really figured out this car, and as one of the top 4 teams. And I think, you know, Monster can still contend can still be a realistic title contender. But if I had to bet on it, I'd probably bet on one of the Triple Eight drivers, especially Will Brown. You know, since throughout the season he's been remarkably consistent outside, you know, of an outlier here or there.
Yeah, Will Brown, I think easily the consistency, it's there. I really want to say Cam Waters, but I feel the driver that's been the least consistent, and just one of those deals not going for him. Bathurst 1000, of course, we'll be previewing that on the Grid Network right here. Jackson, let's get towards wrapping up this show with our one shining moment.
Let's do it. Shining moment, big moment that we appreciated from the weekend, and we're going to allow chat to go in and join as well. Let's go around the horn here with our table, starting with you, Kobe.
My one shining moment from this racing weekend, got to give it to the ending to that race at Watkins Glen today. That was such a spectacular finish between Chris Buescher and Shane van Gisbergen. I know in the past we've seen quite a few classic finishes at Watkins Glen. I have to say what we saw today between the 16 and the 17 cars, that was definitely quite a classic ending. Lots of fun, you know, and that's basically what people love about NASCAR racing. Hard racing, a little contact. SVG gave it to Buescher on the restart, and then Buescher gave it right back, you know, and pushed SVG up right there, but he didn't wreck him, which was really nice. And then I saw a lot of respect between the drivers after the fact. Just thought it was a really good race at Watkins Glen from start to end. So that's my one shining moment for the week.
For me, my shining moment, it comes from Formula One. Oscar Piastri getting that win. He displayed great driving, great aggression, just perfectly ran that race. Because you got to remember, this is his second win. His first win, unfortunately, the controversy with Lando Norris, the McLaren team not getting the strategy right, and then almost begging Lando to give it up. He earned that race win. This one, hands down, he showed he could go out there, get the job done. and really, I think, make life a little harder for the McLaren drivers that he is the driver that could go out there, get the win. He is not a number 2 driver. Oscar Piastri, can you imagine if he had taken the deal with Alpine and if he was with Alpine now? What a move by him. I think overall, Piastri has a bright future, and this is the start of it. That's my shining moment.
2 shining moments for me, technically. I mean, for me, it's got to be for the win here. Great move from Colton Herta, getting around Stingray. Rob taking the low side instantly and diving to the inside of O'Ward. Real one I really want to mention, though, is the play out for NBC and their end of coverage for the IndyCar Series. Obviously, going to Fox full-time next season, but ends a 15-year run. Started out on Versus in 2019, have been full-time since 2019, and have just been phenomenal. And there's no hesitation when I say I got a little teary-eyed when I heard Lee Diffie narrating the play out for the final race for NBC, for IndyCar on NBC for what should be a while, but super happy to see a new chapter for IndyCar, and no hesitation for me to say NBC was like the voice of IndyCar for me growing up and why I wanted to try covering this for a living. So very cool to see that chapter come to a close. Sad, but cool.
That was a great play out at the end, and big thank you to everyone at NBC for the work the last 15 years. That's a long time, and see what's going to happen with IndyCar next year. For us here, you want to follow us for a long time, subscribe, hit the bell icon, because tomorrow, Grid Encore, they're going to be talking about the Xfinity race at Watkins Glen, as well as Indy next. Ben and Brandon will be on the air. Monday, Grid Encore. Wednesday, Grid Tonight, the latest motorsports news. We'll have Women in Motorsports back this next weekend for Catherine Legg, Jamie Chadwick recap. Lots to discuss. And then, of course, we'll do this all over again next weekend. Grid Live pre-race and wrap-up, where we got Formula One, NASCAR, they're running. Update Grid ranking later on social media at Grid Network TV. And, of course, more post-race coverage, more press conference videos coming up from Nashville. For Kobe Lambeth and Jackson Lambert, I'm Joe Samriego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.